Hi everyone, welcome to week 2. We're going to go over some English grammar and grammatical terms. All right. We're also going to do some overview of the course, some sort of detailing of different aspects of the course, intro to e-sessions, what's in your reference folder, some of the books that are there, and then we'll go through some of the material for this week. All right. So the way we'll do e-sessions, and I hope to do this consistently, I can't guarantee it will happen every week, is that e-sessions will be pre-recorded like I'm doing now and then posted for you to watch. Then during the live e-session time, which is Tuesdays at 7:30, I'll be there for office hours, questions, further review, things like that. All right. So I won't necessarily have a slideshow like I do for these, but rather we'll do sort of more screen sharing. I'll kind of plan it as you want me to based on what you need and what you're interested in. All right. So the bottom arrow, all right, this one here, of course, you can see the recorded e-sessions. That's where I'll post these, and then right above it, you can see the live e-sessions. That's where we'll have the kind of office hours. All right. In your week 1 folder, your orientation folder is the reference folder. And this is a fairly important folder because it has some information and resources that you're going to need throughout the year. So I put some screenshots here about how to find it. Right. So on your home page, you go to the lessons, right? And then here's your orientation folder. And then here's your reference folder. You open that up, okay? You can see the course guide here. We're not going to go over that. You can and should read that to make sure you know sort of how the course works. What we are going to look at, though, are the textbook resources here and the other Latin resources here. If you have trouble accessing your textbook, please let me know. I'll say one final thing about this section down here, the general technology. As I say, I pretty much provide you everything you'll need to be successful in the course in terms of glossaries, English to Latin, Latin to English, etc. But if you do need to go onto the internet for whatever reason, maybe you don't have Blackboard available, something like that, LatinLexicon.org is a good online dictionary. There are plenty of bad online dictionaries. LatinLexicon.org is a good one, so I recommend using that. Okay, so in the textbook resources, and these are just PDFs I've made of specific sections of your textbook. It's obviously in there in the full textbook as well, but I just sort of highlight some things. These are just little screenshots that show parts of it, but Latin English vocab, right, so alphabetical, the mark over here, the number I should say over here is the chapter number where that word appears. English or Latin, obviously alphabetical by English, and these will be key to some of the exercises, the English or Latin exercises in your book, which we'll be doing throughout the year. So these are useful resources to have. Excuse me. Morphology is simply forms. And so the morphology reference section at the back there of your book, and of course you have it separate here, just takes you through all the forms you're going to need to know. For Latin 1, you're not going to know really any of those forms right now, but we're going to start learning them in a few weeks, and so it'll be a good reference for you to have as the course progresses. And then finally, you've got vocabulary by chapter. So if you're working on a specific chapter, you can refer to that vocabulary separately rather than kind of scrolling through the textbook to find the vocab list at the end of the chapter. So everything is listed by chapter. All right. I also include a resource that I produced. It's essentially a Latin grammar quick reference. This is also a morphology reference. It also includes all the endings you're going to need to know that you're not necessarily going to know now, but you will as the course goes on. All right. There are 2 versions of the same book. The top one is the iBooks version. If you have some sort of Apple device, a Mac, an iPad, a phone, or an iPod, though those 2 last ones will be smaller in format. Obviously, I would download the iBooks. If nothing else, there's a digital table of contents that lets you scroll through and find things very easily. If you don't have an Apple device, there's a PDF version. Same contents, just a little more cumbersome to navigate. All right, and this is what it looks like. So you can see here, this is the kind of hyperlinked, the linked table of contents. So I can click on that, go to first declension nouns. You can see that's where I am here. Excuse me. And then you can expand each chapter to see the different things that you can get to. So, as I said, if you can, the iBooks is more convenient, but both of them have content. All right, and this is just what the PDF looks like. You can see that there's the little page break there. You just kind of scroll vertically through the whole thing. All right, so let's get into some content, some English grammar terminology. All right, can you define the following terms: subject, verb, direct object? Let's take a look at what those are and what those mean. All right, I took some just things from the internet to kind of help us, give us some illustrations. All right, the subject in general is the doer of the action of an active verb. We'll deal with sort of active and passive much later in the course, but you can see in these examples, right, that the subject I, the subject you, the subject she, right, those are the doers of those actions. Who's doing the loving? I am. Who's doing the learning? You are. Who's doing the writing? She is. The object is the recipient of the action of those verbs, right? So that weekends, English, and bike are all receiving those actions. All right. What's being loved? The weekends. What's being learned? English. What's being ridden? A bike. So subject, doer of the action, object, recipient of the action. And note that you can test what the subject is and what the object is by asking yourself those questions. Who's doing the action? The answer to that is the subject. Who's receiving the action? The answer to that is the object. All right? Just a more kind of visual representation of that, right? You can see the subject is performing the action. The verb, of course, is the action itself. And the object is receiving the action. All right. This is directly from your book, so this should be familiar or will be familiar if you've not looked at it yet. It's a little text heavier, but it goes through exactly the kinds of things that we just talked about. All right, and I thought I'd just use some kind of real-world example, so I just pulled some billboards out. All right. Philly, of course, is the subject. They are doing the wanting. All right. Wanting, of course, is the verb, and LeBron, of course, is the object/direct object. And I am a Philly native, by the way, so yes, we did want LeBron, and of course, it did not get him. All right. A little more of a complex sentence, right? So you've got a few different parts, not all of them that fall into the subject, verb, object category. So you have a noun here in time, and you have a noun here in vote. All right, the question is, which one is the subject? Remember those questions we talked about. So, who's doing the winning? Is the time winning or is the vote winning? Well, it's the vote winning, so vote is our subject. All right, wins, of course, is the verb. And in this particular example, there is no object. And an object is optional. You don't always need a direct object. So this time, the popular vote wins. Popular vote, or just vote, is your subject. Wins is your verb. All right. So James Corden flipped late night on its head. All right. So who's doing the flipping? James Corden. So he, of course, is the subject. All right. Flipped is the action. So that is going to be our verb. And then late night is receiving the action of flipping. So that is going to be our object. And on its head is just a prepositional phrase. We'll get to those as the course goes on. All right. But it is neither a subject nor a verb nor an object. Sorry about that. My phone rang, so I paused while it finished ringing. All right. And the somewhat ubiquitous Chick-fil-A billboard/slogan. All right. Now, a couple things to notice here. All right. Eat is most definitely the verb, right? That is the action. All right. What are we eating? We're eating more chicken. So that is going to be my object. The question is, where is the subject? Because every verb, or every sentence, I should say, does need a subject as well as a verb. The object is optional, but the subject and the verb are not. Excuse me. This verb eat is a specific kind of verb called an imperative. An imperative gives a command. English doesn't express the subject of an imperative, but you can perhaps hear that the implied subject is you, right? Commands, you're talking directly to someone. So the implied subject is you. So you, not stated, but that is the subject. All right. Eat more chicken. Eat is the verb, and more chicken is the object. All right? So a Nike ad and another imperative, note that come together is another imperative, right? It's ordering you to do things, and imperatives are fairly common on billboards. Note that right now, excuse me, is not an object, all right? Right now is an adverb. It says when we should come together. So really all this sentence has is the verb, the understood subject, which we talked about in the last one, which is you, and no object, okay? So as you're interacting with English, for most of you, that should be your first language, your kind of mother tongue. Start to think about it in a little more of an active way. How are sentences put together? What are different words doing in terms of their function? Is something doing an action, in which case it's a subject? Is something receiving an action, in which case it's an object? What are the verbs, etc.? All right. So to practice this, kind of a little thing for you to do on your own, and this will prepare you for the summatives. So just find some article, something that you enjoy, something that you're interested in, and then kind of identify the different parts of speech and sentence structure. So what are the subjects? What are the verbs? What are the objects? Come up with some sort of key for that. You could color code it. So I provide an example here. Right, so you can see that blue are the subjects, orange are the verbs, and green are the objects. Really only one object in the whole little paragraph. The one thing I would point out is not everything is going to be neat and tidy when you're dealing with sort of the language in its sort of functional form. So was released, all right. Yes, the iPhone is the subject, but this is what is known as a passive verb. Now we're jumping ahead a little bit here, but a passive verb is when the subject receives rather than does the action. That's okay, right? That's just something to sort of work through and get used to in terms of your own language. All right. The other thing to point out is that both was and has been are what are called linking verbs. All right. And what those verbs do is just sort of link, hence the name, two things together. Linking verbs are active, but they don't take a direct object because there is no action in them. So in other words, what this was does is it links it and smartphone together. All right? And has been links it and responsible. You can think of a linking verb like an equal sign. It equals the smartphone, or in this case, because of the not, does not equal the smartphone, the first smartphone, and it, in the second one, equals responsible. All right, so let's take a look at this week's summatives. Remember, as the course goes, the formatives do not count towards your grade. They are there for practice, to help you learn the things, to make sure you know what's going on. The summatives are the evaluations that do count towards your grade. All right, so this is the reading summative. It's basically the same thing that we just sort of did, except I give you the paragraph. You're to identify subjects, verbs, and objects. Okay, and remember, I include sort of the example that I just gave as a way to sort of do that. All right, please make sure to follow the directions in terms of grouping them. All right, and if there are any repeats, if there are any words that occur more than once in the paragraph, please identify where that comes from, paragraph number, line number, words around it, something like that, so I know which one you're talking about. Excuse me. And for the writing test, you're taking what you did in your culture test, and then you're just doing the same thing, identifying subjects, verbs, and objects. All right, so a little more flexibility, but the same basic idea there. All right, so that wraps up the recording for week 2. Please email me if you have any questions. The live session will be Tuesday at 7:30, and then you can come there and ask questions or get more practice. Thanks a lot, and have a good week.